I should say welcome to week 27 of the 52-week, just over the halfway mark through the series, and I thought I should make a video for a couple reasons. I wanted to thank everybody for following along. It's been extremely exciting. It's had its ups and its downs and its challenges, especially to keep up with it, with a family and a business and cats and all kinds of crazy stuff, just like everybody else has going on. But been very exciting, and I've learned a lot, and hopefully all of you have learned some things too. The second reason is, in light of the fact I have 26 weeks left, I thought it might be a better way to get to know me, get to see what I do in my day-to-day, or kind of break up the monotony of having to write every week. And I thought it'd give me a chance to answer some questions that I get asked about from time to time, and kind of give you a peek into what I do. Because that is one of the things I get asked about quite a bit, is why I don't show my day-to-day on social media. And I have two reasons why I don't. First is I spend a lot of time at my desk, which is our dining room table, reading soil tests and answering emails. And I also answer a lot of texts as well. That is not extremely glamorous to talk about or show or put in picture form, but that's a large part of what I do. The second reason why is when I'm on a farm, I don't think about taking pictures. I'm there for the farmer. I'm there to answer their questions and to learn about them and their farm and what I can do to help them move forward and be the best grower they can be and leave that farm better than maybe it was before I got there. But it is, I totally forget about social media or photo opportunities. Those are the last things that enter my mind. Does it mean I miss some really good photo opportunities? Yes, it does. But there's a trade-off, and I'm willing to take that because I would rather be there for the farmer and take them into consideration more than my Facebook or Instagram, which is not really all that instant for me. I really have to work at those things, and I don't want to make a farmer stand there and wait for me to post something. I don't think that's necessarily fair to them. And I don't always want to hang around and take pictures because I'm there and it's their time. So like I said, every now and then I do get some good photos, and I try and share them when I do. So this week is the last week I'm going to write about the 6 steps of planning a dinner party, for those of you who have been following along. It is step 5, which is the menu, or if you're looking at it from an agronomic standpoint, soil fertility. And the reason why I'm not going to write about week 6 is because it's harvest, plant, and repeat, and I'm pretty sure that's self-explanatory. I don't think I need to say a lot about that. So when I was getting ready for this post, I thought I should explain what soil fertility is and what it means to me as an agronomist. And the technical definition is managing or balancing nutrients to improve crop production. So 2 key points that I think of when I think of that is that agronomy is the management of soil and the crop that you're growing it in. And I've always said that to me, it is taking science, applying it practically so that the farmer can take the best of what's out there and apply it to their situation. And how you come up with a fertility program or think about fertility for a farm, you take the farmer's goals, their management decisions, and their limitations and resources into consideration. No fertility plan makes sense if a farmer doesn't want it, can't do it, and doesn't have the means to do it. So the other points that I always take into consideration are that no farm or no farmer and there's no soil is the same. You have to look at all of those and take it on a farm by farm, sometimes a field by field basis depending on the soils that are there. I always take everything back to the soil. If you understand the soil that you're working with, you understand its traits, its physical and chemical properties, you can come up with a plan or come up with means in a way to grow crops that's efficient for the farmer and the best for the environment and what you're trying to achieve. No management decision or no management style is the same. Some farms I work on have several different zones that they manage differently. Some farms are half conventional, half certified organic, and those are just merely management decisions and management principles that they're following for certain parts of their farm or a whole farm. But there again, it's up to what the farmer wants and the farmer needs. And one agronomist's idea of a fertile soil isn't always another agronomist's idea. And how to get there, I don't think any two agronomists always, have the same route. I've always said you put two agronomists in a room, you come up with 100 different ideas or solutions, you put 3 in a room, and they will never come out because the possibilities are limitless, they're endless, and they could all be right, they could all be wrong, but you have to go back to the soil and the farmer and what the farmer wants and what the soil is capable of or how far the farmer can push that soil. It always has to go back to that. So 3 things that I take into consideration when I'm coming up with a soil fertility plan or a program for someone is I do take into consideration their finances. And it may not seem like I do at first with some growers, but it is always in the back of my mind that I cannot recommend something a farmer can't afford. It just doesn't make sense for anybody to do that. I take into consideration their limitations and resources. So if a farmer has limited manpower and labor, I cannot give them something that they don't have the time to do because it won't get done anyway. And I always want a list from a grower of everything they have on hand. If they have a neighboring farm that they can get chicken manure from at a decent price, if they already have fertilizers on hand from previous years that they haven't used, I keep track and keep records of that from the growers I work with. Or, when we go into a new season, I ask them to update me on that. Like, what do you have left from last year? Or, what is it that you might have hanging around that we could use? Or, things like that. I think that's huge and it needs to be taken into consideration. I worked with a grower this year I reduced their fertilizer bill by over half because we were able to use what they had, kind of add a couple things into it to tweak it a little bit based on the crop, and I'm pretty sure they're going to have a successful year and save them some money. And last but not least, you always have to take the farmer's goals or what their expectations are. You may have a farmer that doesn't push yield, but they want the most nutritious crop, and that's where their success would lay for them. You have other farmers that just think about yield. They want the most tomatoes they can get, period. They want good tomatoes because you won't sell them if they're not good, but they want numbers. They want as many pounds, as many harvests that they can get off a crop, and that's their goal, and that's what a fertility plan should reflect. So when I was doing some research, I came across some other agronomists and was listening and watching and reading about how they view soil fertility and what they think is the most important when it comes to soil fertility. Because like I said, you put a couple of us in a room and we're going to come up with a lot of ideas. And my thoughts on it are, I go back definitely, and I think you can probably tell that by now, I go back to week 23, where I want to know as much about that field and as much about the farmer that I possibly can, because everybody does everything different. I have a farmer that only wants to farm Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And I have to give them recommendations based on that. I have farmers that have absolutely no money for fertilizer, no money for any kind of fertility program, but yet if I explain some things and I find some products or some resources or inputs for them that they can get at a decent price and can cover a lot of their fertility issues, they might be able to do it. But I have to know how to approach that and what all their limitations and expectations are. And I think one of the most important things when it comes to soil fertility is basing a program off of the inherent properties of soil. Far too often, we either focus on the crop, we focus on the goals, but we never, sometimes you don't hear people talk about what a soil is actually capable of. And it doesn't mean that that limits your crops or what you can grow in it. It just means you know your starting point and you know what you have to work with. It's like, and this is the best example I know, and I use this one all the time, it's like growing blueberries where you should really plant asparagus or something else. Blueberries like certain things. And if you grow them in a soil that has a higher pH, you're constantly fighting against that because that soil wants to go back to its natural state. It wants to go back to what its parent material dictates that it is, and rightfully so. So you're constantly fighting against that. So if you know that as a grower, you know that's the management that you're going to be faced with, that, and you're willing to take on that decision and those management strategies, I'm all for it. And you can come up with a fertility plan to accommodate that. But if you'd like to not maybe spend as much, or you don't have as much to spend, truly understanding the makeup of your soil, the sand, silt, and clay, the pH of your soil will go a long way to making sure that that soil or the farm that you're farming or what you're doing can be the most successful. I think that's still an overlooked principle, and I don't always know why, especially other agronomists. I think that is almost the basis, should be the basis of any soil fertility program. I said pH is the last thing I look at, but the first thing I take into consideration. If you adjust pH, that alone can go a long way in two things. Growing a successful crop and doing it in a way that you don't have to use as many inputs or as much fertilizer. You may need to amend, but you might be able to get away with fertilizing as much, because pH is kind of the driver of everything. Chemistry is incredibly important. An entire fertility plan cannot be based on one aspect alone, but if I had to pick the most important, chemistry would be it. Chemistry dictates a lot of what goes on. I hear some agronomists say it's all up to biology. I hear other agronomists say it's all up to whether you're no-till, conventional, or organic, or it's really a combination of all of those. And I always go back to the triangles that I talked about in week 2. And I talk about in one of my presentations a lot. The triangle with the biology, chemical or chemistry, and then the physical, which is management. You have to take all of that into consideration. It's not just any one thing, but what your decisions are in one of them dictates some of the decisions you have to make in the other. So a good example of that is if you're no-till. That's a management practice, right? If you're no-till, you have to definitely think about your crop and your crop rotation. But one key thing is inputs. I think if you're no-till, the amount of inputs has to be increased, or it really has to be taken into consideration, because you're not relying on chemistry and you're not relying on the plants as much, you're relying on your management. If you're an all-natural grower, your management kind of is dictated for you, so you have to rely on biology, and you have to balance the biology with your inputs and your management. It's no one thing trumps anything. They're all major players in soil fertility. A sound fertility program starts before the first crop goes in and ends when you're done farming. So that means it never ends. It's constantly going. I think I stated that farming is like a revolving dinner party. You will always be having the dinner party. If you're planting crops and you're expecting a yield, it is ongoing and continuous. And that's why the information of knowing previous crops and intended crops can be extremely valuable when coming up with a plan or deciding inputs, or if you might not need to use inputs because you grew a crop that could actually benefit the next one. And those are all decisions that are extremely important. Oh, it's not complicated, or at least it shouldn't be. So I don't think soil fertility is as complicated as what some people make it out to be. I think if you have a good plan, you plan ahead of time, and if things happen, like crop failure or something, you can take that into consideration. But knowing what a crop needs, and ultimately, first and foremost, knowing your soil through the soil survey map, knowing your soil type, and getting your soil tested, that you've already conquered over half your battle, because that's where the majority of building a soil fertility program comes from, at least for me. I understand that some people think biology is the answer, but I believe that if you build a soil, if you focus on management, inputs, and your crops, the soil biology will come. That you will create an environment that they want to be in, and the inherent, the indigenous biology of the soil is what will flourish and what really should flourish, and you should not have to necessarily inoculate or add biology. Kind of like that movie, I think it was called Field of Dreams, where they said if you build it, they will come. If you have management strategies and use inputs and do things to encourage the biology that is already naturally occurring, then that's part of the triangle, part of one of those pieces that you should be putting together and use to your advantage. And it is not that complicated. No, I said no, I don't write or talk about it in any more length than generalities, because I wrote a free ebook and several posts about specific amendments. Length, other, in general. It's true. In presentations and when I talk in public, I do get asked about specific inputs and amendments, and I will gladly answer you all day long. It's extremely hard for me to write about them because I don't know what someone wants to know about them. So I did put an ebook together. You're more than welcome to sign up for my newsletter and download it and go through it. It does have typos, and there are more and more amendments and fertilizers that I could have spoke about in it, but it was a good start, a good basis to get started from. But most of all, point one of the points to consider: no farm, no soil, and no farmer are the same. It is hard for me to talk about soil fertility programs specifically if I don't have a specific farmer or soil test that I'm talking about. And I don't always feel using my clients' soil tests as examples. Maybe in the future I will use something like that, but for right now, generalities are about as far as I'm going to go. And point 7, I said there's nothing new. Trust me, I'm looking every day. I do look at the market and, what latest and greatest fertilizer is out there, biologicals that they're coming out with, the trendiest things to use on your farm or in your soil. And I have some very strong opinions when it comes to the industry. I do not think soil follows trends. It has no idea what somebody is currently selling on the market or what the hottest product at the latest convention was. It wants to always go back to its inherent physical and chemical properties, which are dictated by the parent material. I often say it's kind of like me. I would love to be a tall, hot blonde, but I was born a short brunette. That is how God made me, or how I was made, however you believe people are made, but that's what I believe. There's nothing I can do about it. I will always be a short brunette, no matter what inputs or management strategies. My management strategies and inputs, all they really do is dictate my weight, which I talk openly about that as well. It's very similar to soil and soil health and soil fertility. But at the end of the day, there's nothing new out there. There is nothing all that different than there was 20, 30, 40 years ago on one side of agriculture. There's some inputs that are as old as I am, trust me. My dad and I talk about it regularly. And on the all-natural and the organic side, honestly, they're dragging stuff up from the bottom of the ocean that is millions of years old. What changes are the names and the faces. The names of the products and the faces of who is promoting them or who likes them or who is selling them. Now, that's my basic opinion on it over others, but they're really all the same. Rotations will change, spraying sequences will change, application rates will change, things will be tweaked. I know that Marone just came out with a new product, Stargus. I don't think I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's based on biologicals that they already have. It's still basically the same, it's just a different strand, which is good. And I'm pretty sure I like a lot of their products. I recommend them. I have a lot of growers using them. But it all boils down to being basically the same. So, like I said, trust me, I look every day. I know a lot of reps from companies, and I kind of try and keep a pulse on what's going on out there, but it's just a good point to keep in mind. And number 8, I will answer calls and emails all day long about your farm and your soil and a fertility program. Ask my family, because I will. I've taken texts 24 hours a day, and it depends on the season and the grower and what's going on, but I try and limit to phone calls and emails during office hours, because I geek out over all of this and I enjoy it and I think it's fun and I like working with farmers. But most importantly, it really does all go back to week number 2 and the triangles, and that is balancing the biological, the chemical, and the physical properties. And you do that, a good soil fertility program, you have to think about your plant and your crop, you have to think about your management practices, and you have to think about your inputs. That's it. Inputs are nothing more than chemistries. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, or, what fertilizer dealer you buy them from, they're all chemistries, and they should be thought of as such. At least in my mind, that's how I think of them. And management strategies are totally up to the grower and totally up to the farmer. However they choose to do them, whatever management they are willing to take on, you have to be willing to take on that management, because that will dictate your inputs and it'll dictate your biology, the plants and the crops. So for me, it always goes back to a triangle, this triangle. No one of these out-trumps another. You have to be thinking about them all the time, and taking them all into consideration to have a successful soil fertility program. And that takes us back to what soil fertility really is. It's the managing and balancing of soil nutrients to improve your crop production, to get the most tomatoes you want, to get the best blueberries you want, to get, the most stellar carrots at market. Whatever it is, whatever your goal is, it has to take in all 3 of those into consideration. So I hope you enjoyed the video. It's only taken me 30 times of recording it, and I was horribly nervous, but maybe we'll do it again in the future.